Welcome to Thai PBS English News Service. Tonight you're with me, Rungtip Chonapalai. A group of 400 members of parliament and senators have refused to withdraw their support for the charter amendment, protesting that the Constitution Court is interfering in the legislative process. Meanwhile, both plaintiffs and defendants in the case their closing statements in writing. Those on both sides of the Chartered Amendments case submitted their closing arguments in writing to the Office of the Constitution Court earlier today. Both sides are confident in their statements and in their respect for the Constitution Court's verdict, regardless of the outcome. The plaintiffs, those opposing the amendment process, submitted a total of 5 closing statements. Democrat MP Virat Kalayasiri, serving as the representative of the plaintiff, indicated that all the 5 statements concluded that the motive behind charter amendment is to overthrow the constitutional monarchy. However, he is willing to accept the verdict in the event the court rejects that claim. Major General Jamlong Simuang, co-leader of the People's Alliance for Democracy, asked the Constitution Court to delay its Friday verdict, as earlier on the Yellow Shirt movement had petitioned the court to remove MPs and senators who are in support of the Charter Amendment, and hence would like the court to include this matter in its adjudication. Meanwhile, an informal joint session made up of 416 MPs and senators in support of amending the Constitution agreed not to abide by the Constitution Court's injunction because supporting charter amendment is the right of legislators. So, in their view, the court's verdict will not be constitutional to begin with and is considered to be intervening the legislative process. In the meantime, the Secretariat of the House of Representatives and the Legal Department have been asked to provide clarifications. In ensuring safety at the court when the ruling is announced on Friday, General Yuthassak Sasiprapha, Deputy Prime Minister responsible for defense, has ordered authorities to be on high alert. The Army Commander-in-Chief has already deployed roughly 1,000 troops to monitor the situation closely. Commander of the 25th Infantry Unit confirmed that dozens of Thai nationals arrested for encroaching into Myanmar remain detained in Koh Song province. Meanwhile, while attempts are being made to coordinate their release, 8 more Thais were arrested for the same offense. Further investigation is underway after some detainees were found with drugs and weapons. Family members of the detainees held for illegally crossing the border to plant rubber trees in Myanmar territory at Koh Song, opposite Banong Skraburi district, have been closely following the progress of efforts to get their relatives repatriated, which so far have been to no avail. 8 more Thai nationals were arrested on the same charges yesterday, bringing the total number of detainees to 57. The Thai government requests for the release of the 57 detainees have not yet received a response from the Myanmar army. However, they did say that further investigation was required since some illicit drugs and arms had been found during the operation. Meanwhile, Thai officials are informing others tempted to establish plantations on Myanmar soil to return home as soon as possible. Colonel Ponsak Punsawat, commander of the 25th Infantry Unit, also insisted that all Thai detainees have not been transferred from Koh Song to other provinces, as Myanmar's local media had reported. International Monetary Fund chief Christine Lagarde started her trip to Asia last week and is to attend a seminar in Thailand tomorrow. The head of the IMF has been very vocal in expressing her concerns about the global economic outlook and protectionism. During her trip to Asia, IMF chief Christine Lagarde has been focusing on the current global economic situation and Asia's increasingly critical role in the global economy, as well as cooperation with ASEAN and the Chiang Mai Initiative. Earlier, the IMF chief visited Japan, where she emphasized that the continuing global economic crisis needs a stronger and cooperative policy response. She also paid tribute to Japan's strong support for international cooperation. While in Indonesia, Lagarde held talks with President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono. She congratulated the President of Indonesia on the reforms and achievements that have led to strong growth and increased the economic resilience. She noted that due to the interconnectivity between the world's economies, no one economy is totally immune from fluctuations elsewhere in the world. Tomorrow, the IMF chief is to attend the Thailand Asia Development Bank or ADB, an IMF conference called Towards a More Stable Global Economic System, along with the ADB president and the governor of the Bank of Thailand. The latest IMF Thailand Corporation is the bilateral contribution of $1 billion to a fund assisting member countries with financial problems. A severe labor shortage coupled with the minimum wage hike has prompted 15 garment manufacturers to relocate their production bases to neighboring countries. Meanwhile, the Eurozone debt crisis continues to impact Thailand's export market.
Wanlop Witanakon, Deputy President of the Federation of Thai Industries, or FTI, revealed that 15 garment manufacturers have moved their production bases to neighboring countries, including Laos, Myanmar and Cambodia. They are already in the construction process, and production lines are expected to be up and running by mid-2013. The companies attributed their decision to move to a severe shortage of labor, as well as a hike in production costs as a result of a higher minimum wage. The Eurozone debt crisis, on the other hand, is another factor squeezing the garment industry, which, in the first 5 months of this year, experienced a 9.2% fall in export orders year-on-year. Worse still, the industry's export growth is expected to decline by a further 7 to 10% during the remainder of the year, as the EU switches to consuming cheaper Vietnamese, Cambodian and Chinese products. Likewise, the gem and jewelry industry indicated that its exports to the EU plunged by 17.4% in the first 5 months. The industry is urging the government to help them find new markets, such as Asean and Latin America, as well as to promote border trade and encouraging investments in neighboring countries. Low-interest loans to reduce costs are also urgently needed, as some firms are already reducing their production.
With AEC 2015 getting even closer, Thailand will have to prepare for changes the way business are managed both domestically and internationally. Earlier, I spoke with former Deputy Governor of the Bank of Thailand, Dr. Bandit Nithawon, now the President of the Thai Institute of Directors, about what the nation should expect. Here's more.
In that aspect, both in terms of mitigating the impact and then finding ways to explore greater opportunities, because exporting sector which Thailand have relied on most in the past will be somewhat being tested because of the slowness of the market abroad. So we need to look for different driver of growth, which will be the challenge. But in the longer term, basically, it's issues of competitiveness, whether the Thai economy can upgrade itself and perform at the level that will ensure continued prosperity and growth. Because all countries, we have the same challenge. But in our case, it will have to do with more getting ready in terms of policy, have some more forward-looking policies and get the financial sector and the private sector ready so that they can move forward. So basically, it's the similar issues that we had before.
But then you also mentioned about something about transparency and also the good governance of doing business in Thailand.
I think that will become the important issue, because if you look at what international investors are looking for, they're looking for sustainability. This is the key word now. So when they invest, they don't just invest for short-term profit. They're now investing for longer-term profit. And as you know, in the globalized market, costs in terms of raw materials, labor, taxes, they're getting to converge into the same level. So companies around the world would find it, sort of more difficult to differentiate itself in terms of costs. So the only thing that will differentiate the company in terms of long-term performance would be the way it's being managed. And this is where good governance comes in, because good governance, or having good governance, is identified with a more sustained performance of company. So, thousands and thousands of investment institutions abroad, when they make investment decision, they take governance, they take environmental implication into account. So the Thai company, if you want to be part of that scene, you need to beef up and get ready.
Well, now take a look of the life of a taxi driver as a defenseless taxi driver was mugged and murdered today. He was one of many taxi drivers who chose not to carry weapons of self-defense, such as knife, to avoid being sued or framed by passengers who may claim the drivers abused them. Yet this only prompts drivers to find unorthodox ways of defending themselves. Taxi driver here said, "I keep it next to the driver's seat," say a taxi driver, Mr. Sakda Borabut. He is talking about his crowbar, which he keeps for protection. He says that the worst clients he has ever had were ones who jump without paying. However, he and his fellow drivers generally apply for fares in dodgy areas, such as near Pathum, where drivers are known to have been mugged. Thai PBS spoke to another driver who chose to remain anonymous. He said that the only legal method of protection drivers have is the freedom to choose which clients to pick up, but that is not reliable enough. However, taxi drivers are not the only travelers wary of danger on the road. Many passengers, especially women, worry about criminals posing as taxi drivers. One anonymous passenger told Thai PBS that she protects herself from danger by texting her friend the car's license plate number. Another passenger suggests not taking a taxi at night because that's when crimes are most often committed. In the past 6 months, there have been 28 reported cases of taxi drivers being mugged at work on the road. Today, Australia's Foreign Minister and Japan Foreign Minister met with their counterparts from ASEAN in Phnom Penh to discuss regional issues of mutual concern. One of the key topics is the week-long meeting will be the ongoing territorial dispute over the South China Sea. Here's more.
Australia's foreign minister held an hour-long meeting with ASEAN ministers and senior officials, a meeting which focused on regional security, among other issues. Media reported that Carr was likely to touch upon the issue of asylum seekers during his talks with ASEAN counterparts. 2 boats carrying suspected asylum seekers have recently capsized and survivors were taken to Christmas Island. Refugee policy and border protection are a hot-button issue in Australia, despite the fact the country only receives a small number of the world's asylum seekers each year. Meanwhile, Japan's Foreign Minister Gemba said his country is seeking stability in the region and is planning to host a special summit with ASEAN late next year to strengthen maritime security cooperation. Nonetheless, China has claims on the majority of the South China Sea, which is one of the world's busiest shipping lanes and rich in oil and gas deposits. Taiwan, the Philippines, Vietnam, Brunei and Malaysia also claim parts of it. The Philippines and other countries, which claimed the area as their own, want to unite and persuade China to accept a code of conduct in the sea. But China has maintained that it wants to discuss the issue bilaterally with the claimants and not collectively. ASEAN Secretary-General Surin Pitsuwan said talks over the formation of a code of conduct were underway.
Now we're working on the code of conduct, which is expected to be binding and adopting a lot of measures, a lot of practices, a lot of universally accepted practices in international shipping, in international transport, naval communications into this one ASEAN-owned or one regional-owned, meaning ASEAN and China together.
Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen said that progress in reaching agreement on a code of conduct with China in an effort to ease tensions in the South China Sea was a crucial task of this week's forum. But critics say Cambodia, which receives large amounts of aid from China, will be reluctant to push the agenda and bring China to the collective negotiating table. Hugh Adams, Thai PBS.
Thank you, Kun Hugh. And during her week-long diplomatic tour of Southeast Asia, Hilary Clinton has become the first U.S. Secretary of State to visit Laos in more than 5 decades. The landmark visit was to discuss economic ties, a controversial dam project, and the legacy of the Vietnam War. Clinton met with the Communist government's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister in the capital of Vientiane. The goal is to bolster America's standing in some of the fastest growing markets of the world and counter China's expanding economic, diplomatic and military dominance in the region. 37 years after America's long war in Indochina ended, Laos is the latest test case in the Obama administration's efforts to take U.S. foreign policy away from the long wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. It follows a long period of estrangement between Washington and a once hostile Cold War era foe, and comes as U.S. relations warm with countries such as Myanmar and Vietnam. In her meetings, Clinton was to discuss environmental concerns over a proposed dam on the Mekong River, investment opportunities and joint efforts to clean up unexploded bombs the U.S. dropped on Laos during the Vietnam War. Greater American support programs in these fields are included in a multi-million-dollar initiative for Southeast Asia expected to be announced later this week. And that wraps up tonight's edition of Thai PBS English News Service. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Rung Tip Chonapalai. Sawadee ka.